You want to go?
Yeah, let's
okay.
go.
All right.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Alain, Ted, Rachel, and myself. We're really happy that you could join the webinar, and really looking forward to a great discussion with all of you. If there's anything, like if you cannot hear us or see us or anything, just let us know through the comments in the chat room. And please feel free to interrupt as much as you want. There's no stupid questions, so please ask us anything. We want to keep it very, with a lot of interaction. That's why we're here with all of you. So please, whenever, ask a question, and I will relay the question to, transfer the question to Ted or Alain. And yeah, and we'll try to treat as many questions as possible. So again, please feel free. All right, so like I was saying, very happy to have you all. Just to introduce myself, I recognize a few names, so happy to see them on the webinar. I opened the restaurant Racines in New York in 2014, and I was lucky enough to have the wine of Alain and Ted on the wine list, and I got the chance as well to have a few dinners with Ted and Rachel, like at Racine, and fell in love even more so with the wines. So when we discussed about a webinar a few months ago, I couldn't be more honored and extremely happy to be able to host the webinar. I moved back from New York to Paris now, where I'm the director for the Cave Le Grand, and now my job is trying to convince French people to not drink any more Burgundy, but to drink Ted's wine. And the work is easy with Alain's wine because you can imagine Alain's wine are very popular and famous in France. So it's great to have those two winemakers in the selection and continue the work I was doing in New York, here in Paris. So again, I'm going to start with Alain and Ted, and like I said, please feel free to interrupt as much as you can. We thought first it would be interesting to know the connection between you two, Alain and Ted, how you met each other, and then maybe each of you can tell us a little bit more how you started, in that business, and where you're at now, and then we'll move on a few different questions, and we already have a few questions also from panelists, but we'll go on from there. So if you want to start with your first meeting, and then a little bit of history on your sides.
Who starts? You, Ted?
Yeah, I think Alain probably has better memory than I do, but we met at Domaine Dujac. That much I can remember very clearly, and that was because I was working there as an apprentice or a stagiaire in 1980 when Jacques Sess had a bad case of sciatica and was having troubles with his back, and Alain and Elisabeth Graillot were really dear friends of Roz and Jacques. And I don't actually remember the first meeting, but I was a 22-year-old American. And at that time, Alain was just a friend of the Sesses, right? I mean, you had known each other for many years, right, Alain?
Yes, we are very, very close friends with Roz and Jack for years. We have been doing ski races with Jack. I'm talking about the 60s, so because we are old now. But so it's a very, very long history. I've met Jack before he was a winemaker, and when he became a winemaker, and I had a process in my mind which was not very, very different, but maybe a little bit later, and being a little bit older than he was when he started. But in the early 80s, I was in Paris, and he had a lot of interest in wine. And of course, my tutor was Jacques, because it was my good friend who could help me to visit wineries, to introduce me to winemakers, and to learn and to teach me a lot about wine making and first wine drinking too. And that's probably one of these trips that I first met Ted. it was probably before I was myself a winemaker, because my first vintage was only 85. Before, I've been a kind of trainee at Dujac, as Ted was years before.
And Alain, when Jacques first said, I mean, you guys were really good friends at that point. When he first said to you, I'm going to go make wine, like I really want to do this. What did you think? Did you think he was crazy, or how did you take it?
It's a period of our lives that we had left at that time. I was like, let me try to remember. Maybe at the time I was not in France at that time, so we had less contact with Jacques. I get to see him more after when I came back to France in the early 80s. That's why probably I did not follow exactly the process in his mind to become a winemaker.
Yeah, because you were living in Central America, right?
Yes, I did. Yes, indeed. And my two sons were born over there. Yes, one in Costa Rica, the other in Guatemala. That was years ago.
Did they learn Spanish while they were there?
Maxime, the elder, spoke Spanish when he was 3 years old. When he came to France, he forgot everything, and so he does not speak Spanish. And Antoine, who left Central America when he was too young to speak Spanish, but as he has been living in Spain and now he's working in Spain, so he's really fluent in Spain, more than his father.
Yeah. And what was when you came back and you went to work at Dujac, was that just to hang out with a friend, or were you really interested in?
No. It was really because I had already decided in my mind that I should become a winemaker, and I should try something a place to be a winemaker. To buy land or to rent land was not the key. The problem was I wanted to do wine, and probably more in the south, more in the Rhone Valley than in Burgundy, because that's the place where I'm from, and I love Syrahs. At that time, I loved Syrahs, and I still love it. But definitely, Rhone was my idea. The question was to find something to work with, which I've been able to do in 85.
And that's, I mean, it's important to remember, especially back then, that people who were not born into winemaking in France and then went into it, that was unusual. That was not common at all.
It's becoming a little bit more common now, but it's true that at that time it was not really very, very common. And to be honest, it was not very easy. It's not very easy because the world in the agriculture was not very open to newcomers, and the rules and the regulations are complicated. You have lots of things which could be totally exotic for American people, the SAFE or all the regulation. That's for you. That's something you cannot even understand. But for us, it's a big hurdle, and it was not easy. It has not been easy for me, but I've been able to succeed, but with a little bit of luck, which is never.
And a little bit of work too, right, Arnaud?
Yeah, just a little bit. So Alain, did you go straight from Dujac to Crozes and start make wine, or how long did it take you also to find the vineyards? And
I found the vineyard by myself. I've been looking to. I remember I've asked Marcel Guigal if he could help me to do something. He could not do because I knew Marcel. And but what I owe to Jacques is really to give me confidence, to give me expertise, and but the process to find a vineyard was done by me and around me. Jacques was not really involved with that, but I owe so many things to Jacques about that, about all the others, the expertise and the confidence. And
that was really the extraordinary thing about Domaine Dujac in the early 1980s, right? A period of time, at least in my mind, where Burgundy is emerging from, I mean, there's still sort of a post-war dimension to it, right? The 1970s were not kind on Burgundy in terms of vintage quality. I think that's a fair statement. There was a lot of wine on the market, right, Arnaud? It was not, it didn't sell overnight like it does now. And there's Jacques Sess, someone who is not a Burgundian from outside of the region with an American wife who has this amazing openness and generosity, both in terms of inviting people to come work with him, whether it was Alain Graillot, whether it was me, whether it was any number of stagiaires and Jean-Pierre de Smet, who began Domaine de la Rhone, and a cellar, right, Alain, which was just beautiful, full of, he has always had a great intellectual curiosity about wine and all types of wine, which I think he inherited partly from his dad, right, Alain? That was where some of that came from.
No, it was really a kind of university at Dujac, because he had people coming from many very other different places with very different background, and we coming at Dujac just to learn about, to learn, to understand, and to see how it was possible to do wine, and that's a university exactly. That was great at that time.
Alain, did you overlap ever with James Halliday? I think James Halliday, the famous Australian writer, was there one or two vintages. Is that right?
I have met James quite often, but never at Dujac. But I've met him in Australia, and at Dujac never. No.
And spending time over there, did you see an impact on your way you vinify now? Like destemming, non-destemming, and everything. Like, both of you guys, did Jacques have an impact on, or it was more a broader, like you said, giving you confidence in yourself, or, what was your, what did you take from your experience there?
As I told you, it was mainly to give me confidence and to help me to decide to do so. Technically speaking, my first vintage 85, we did not destem, but honestly, I did not destem because I even did not know that there is other way to do. So now I know why I do not destem, but at that time I did that because I've seen that doing that. I've seen other people doing so, and I thought that it was the only way to make wine. I still do that, but I know exactly why I stick to this process.
And Alain, tell us a little bit, because it's the story of how you started, meaning the actual estate and where it came from, is an interesting story. Will you share with us a little bit how that happened and how you found the property? And
it's a very hectic story, because I came 10 days before vintage, and I met two old ladies, two old widows. They had this estate was free. They had the owner passed away 3 months ago, and they decided they did not agree as to do the process, so I've decided to do nothing. And I just came and I made an offer to buy the grapes and to run the winery, and surprisingly they agreed. And I've done that for 3 years with a short-term lease, because with the French regulation, you cannot make they cannot do a fermage. So I was just buying grapes and renting the winery. And this kind of lease, you cannot do more than 1 year. So every year we change the name of the company renting but it was me, but we had to change. And surprisingly, in '88, they've decided to sell, and obviously, and I could buy it, and at a very fair price. price was not really the issue. Well, it was always an issue to find money, but frankly, if I look back, I think price was not a major problem. The major problem was a technical, legal problem to be able to buy, and it has not been very easy. But now it's done. And everything is forgotten.
But it was also really primitive conditions, right? I mean, you were walking into an old cellar that hadn't been tended. Yeah, I mean, this was not easy.
It's interesting to know that the previous owner was doing some wine, but he was selling grapes to the négociant. But his main activity was to breed pigs. So the winery was mainly a big piggery, and it was run as a piggery. So you can imagine how dirty and stinking it was. And we have a small place to make wine. It was a little bit rustic and a little bit old style, but gradually we have been able to improve and to refurbish a little bit things. Now it's more showable now.
I love that story. And then I also wanted to ask you, Alain, the other memory I have from the Dujac times, we mentioned the fact that they had all kinds of wine there, but I specifically remember old vintages of Jaboulet Les Talabert, right? Which is the Gros Hermitage cuvée that was really a specialty for them. And did tasting those older vintages of that wine have any influence on you, or did you already know, look, I'm from the Rhone, this is my home, this is where I want to go?
Well, once again, my first vintage was done according to my ideas about what should be a wine from the Rhone. But I had obviously Talabert was a kind of how do you say that? Something which has to be tried to be. It's a kind of a target, but benchmark. I was looking at, but frankly, I've done wines. My first vintage was 11.5 degrees alcohol. Because I did not want to chapterize, and I've done that afterward. I do it now again because there's no point to do chapterization now, as you probably know. But so I've done really the wine according to what I thought convenient, and then it has been more by chance and by deep reflection.
And coming back to your philosophy, we have a question like what's your reasoning behind not destemming? Because you did it the first vintage because you didn't know any other way to do it, and then you liked it, and so you kept on doing like this? Or have you ever done a vintage where you have destemmed actually? Or
well, when I've been skilled enough to understand what could be the merit of destemming or not destemming, I've decided to keep to stick to my first point and not to destem. And today, to me, a wine which is not destemmed brings the stems. The stems are a kind of reservation of freshness, which will be seen in the glasses after years. I think so. Wines with stems are certainly less attractive when young, less round and soft, but the stems brings you good potential of aging. And I've done some trials to destemming, and I've not been convinced. But to be really honest, I was not fair in the way of doing my tasting, because the only vintage when I've done some trial to destem was probably the worst one to do so, which was 2003. So maybe and totally unconscious, I wanted to get the result the result I've got.
So see this, Arnaud, I was educated in a virtual cabal of anti-destemmers, between Jacques, who didn't have one, and Graillot, when I first asked him the question about it, destemming, you know, when we started bringing his wines to the States, and I got the most derogatory, why in the world would I ever destem anything, Lemon? What's wrong with you? Kind of an approach. It was pretty funny. The two of them were the great religious leaders of this particular sect.
But what do you think about it, Ted, on your side? What do you do?
I don't dare say anything because they'll beat me up. They'll come after me to this day, right? No, I think it's a wonderful question. As listening to Alain, one of the things I find really, and I'm not deflecting the question, Arnaud, I'll come back to it. But one of the things that I find really fascinating about the Graillot wines, and it remains true to me with the way that Maxime is making them, is there's this really interesting wild quality to the wines. There's an element of, you know, la Syrah sauvage about these wines that is just lovely and is very, very different to something like the direction of the Guigals. They're almost like different varieties to me. And I find that really fascinating. It speaks to the complexity of Syrah, right? And the way that Syrah can express itself in so many different ways. But I don't recall at that time, meaning the 1980s, a lot of wines in that sort of, I'm going to use these adjectives, you know, you can quibble with them, but pure expression of the Northern Rhone. I mean, I guess we could say, you know, Clap at that time, right? Alain had an expression somewhat similar to that. But maybe Alain, knowing the Northern Rhone so much better than I did, can speak just briefly to that, because I just, the best wineries to me, Arnaud, there is an expression of person and place, of state and place that transcends both the person and the place. And I think that when I think about Alain's wines, I really get that. I mean, when you open a bottle of Graillot, it's actually like, excuse me, Alain, like the old vintages of Dujac, which were 100% whole cluster years ago before climate change, where you could open a bottle of Dujac and you almost didn't need to taste the wine. You could smell that it was Dujac. And that's a beautiful thing, because it's the marriage of that place and that particular estate, which is incredible.
Okay, go ahead.
No, that's it. Go ahead, Alain.
Yeah, I think which is surprising, which is let's say funny, is that we have a few brewers in Northern Rhone who mostly do not destem. You mentioned Clap, of course, which has been one of the most traditional about that. You can also talk about the Gonon in Saint-Joseph, or Jean-Paul Jamet in Côte-Rôtie. And it's surprising to see that it's not a question of comparing this wine to another, but it's surprising to see how many customers, common customers we have. When people buy wine from me, they buy also that we do common shipments every week. So I bring cases to Clap, or Gonon brings cases to me, and we do common shipment, because obviously the profile of the wines are different, but the profiles are very similar. And that people certainly understand that's what people like. I think so. And then you talk about change of climate. It's true that I did not mention that, but everybody knows that with the stem, which was an issue 30 years ago. Now it's a good point that we lose about more than half degree of alcohol in the final wine, which is something very, very important at the moment now.
So I'll jump in on that, Arnaud. So I think that's one of the most important things to me, thinking about it now today. So having gone through the experience of the whole cluster world at Dujac, we certainly wanted to use whole clusters in California, but you know, this is a different world. and it was a new world for me too, to learn. And so it's not the same. It's not the same place. The conditions are not the same. And so the question of how much was a good one, and I didn't dare go 100%. I thought I should go less, and so we spent a few years doing that. And then I really became interested in the wines that Henri Jaillet had made in Burgundy, and I thought, there's some absolutely amazing wines that he made, and this contrast between Domaine de la Romanée-Conti at that time and Henri Jaillet, whose winemaking could not have been more different in some ways, and both of which yielded wines for Rhone Romanée that were absolutely extraordinary in the great vintages, was a real brain teaser for me, how that could be. And so we ended up destemming the wines completely from 99 until 2004. And I eventually came around to what Alain is saying, which is that there's and I'll only speak to Pinot Noir, although I know it's true for Syrah, there's a freshness and a green note in a positive sense that is present when you ferment with whole clusters that, especially in the age of global warming, only becomes more important over time.
Yeah, because you both mentioned, climate change, and obviously when you vinify full, like not destemming, you want the stem to be ripe. Like, so would you see that way of vinification more common in the next few years? And coming back to that climate change thing, what do you see as your biggest challenge nowadays? Talking about wildfires for you, Ted, drought, extreme, temperatures, for pretty much everywhere, also in the Northern Rhone or California. How do you cope with those issues on your sides?
So for us, I think, Arnaud, look, there's two things. One is that vine age is a big factor, right? So in 1993, when we started Littorai, there were no old vines on the coast. There were a few in Anderson Valley, but not very many, and nothing on the coast. So as a result, there really wasn't the opportunity to work with vines that might have, stood up to whole clusters better, at least in my mind. Now we're, 30 some odd years later, almost, they're 30-year-old vines. Some of them are dry farmed. It's a different world. It's a different world without climate change. And then you add climate change on top, and of course that accentuates it. But for us, the big difference is not so much midsummer. The big difference we're seeing is we're budding out earlier, and our season is drier longer. So we have less rain than we had before. And the two of those together mean that, our average picking dates have absolutely moved forward. No question, about 3 weeks probably on average. Yeah.
Well, that's also an issue here in France because, as probably most of you know, we had a big frost issue like a month and a half ago, over more than a week, with very low temperatures. And if you have early budding, obviously you're more exposed to that. What was the impact on your side, Alain, for the frost?
In my case, we have not been affected by frost in Crozes-Hermitage, and I hate to say that, but we are in a place where we never got any trouble with frost. So it's very located. With just a question of luck. We are not better than the others. We are just a little bit luckier. But where we are, we have never got any frost. Hopefully, it will keep like that. We got frost in Beaujolais, but in Crozes-Hermitage, nothing.
And is that true traditionally, Alain? It's traditionally been frost-free area. I mean, going back historically.
No, frankly, where we are in Crozes-Hermitage, some of my neighbors this year got some trouble with frost, especially people located not a little bit closer to the river, because we are not far from the Isère. So some vineyards closer to the river has been affected. But basically, when we look at some disease, some disaster in some other area, the area of Crozes-Hermitage has been preserved from that, basically.
Did that play a role at all in you choosing to be there? Did you think, oh, this place is safer? agriculturally?
I don't know. No, I don't know that.
It's something that I thought about, right, Arnaud, is the agricultural
Yeah.
diversity thing. Unlike Alain, right, when I looked at this sort of unknown territory that we deal with, that no one knew anything about, I was afraid to buy a piece of land simply because the idea of being wedded to one place in a new region that's, you know, basically unknown, I said, there's no way I can possibly do that. And so there is, of course, an understandable prejudice against purchasing grapes throughout the world, you know, and so you should be a state, that's the highest expression of wine. And I think that's often true. But I think that there's no way anyone could have gained the knowledge of the true Sonoma coast as quickly as we were able to do without purchasing grapes. There was no family fortune that could have purchased all these sites. They were too diverse. They were too hard to figure out. And the ability to work with growers allowed us to build a palate reference, right, of what this place could do and what the wines could taste like that we couldn't have done otherwise. And that's one of the things that we've remained faithful to. I mean, we're still 50% purchased grapes for that very reason, because there's still those opportunities that occur with people who are really dedicated to quality. And you know, that was not the case in, going back to our common history with Alain, in Burgundy in the 1980s or 1970s. Most of the best wines, were estate made by estate, and a lot of what negociants had to deal with, and maybe some of our negociant friends are going to throw rocks at the screen, but were people who were not as caring about quality. Some were, of course they were, but it's not easy or it was not easy in traditional France to purchase grapes of quality, right? That was not an easy thing to do. Whereas here you were dealing with first generation grape growers who got in it for some reason of passion, right? They wanted to be doing this. And so they did care about quality. They may not have had a lot of experience, they may not have had a lot of knowledge, but that meant something to them.
In my case, it was totally different because when I started, I had to buy grapes from somebody I didn't know. I've got to learn the potential of the area. Fortunately, the state where I'm now had a tradition of no using weed killers. So these vineyards, the vineyards of Crozes-Hermitage, have always been cultivated. So it's a big asset. And but the basis was I started to buy grapes, but as soon as I could do it, I just focused only on my own vineyards, because the vineyards I bought the grapes from became mine afterwards. And and we have improved the farming. We have obviously kept not using any herbicide. We cultivate everything, and now we went through that. Now we are now organic, of course.
So you're already pretty busy with your very own vineyards and grapes. So why and how did you, happen to make wine? Beaujolais, Morocco, Spain. Like, how did this happen, and when?
Well, the answer is very simple. I have two sons, and I have to keep them busy. So, now, when Maxime joined us in 2004 and Antoine 2010, and I thought it was important for me to not to be in the winery with them. They had to be alone. They had to do their own job. They had to get themselves, and so it was a very good incentive for me to move and to move to something different. So I started in Morocco by chance in 2005, just after a holiday over there. So we met people. So we made an agreement to make wine together, and then Beaujolais was, as I told you, my intention since a very long time. And it's convenient because we started the first vintage in Beaujolais was 2014, and at that time the team Maxime and Antoine were fully skilled to do Gros Hermitage. And as I was in Beaujolais with my friends, I was not bothering them, and they were free to do exactly what they want, and they did it very well. So, and I was very happy in my Beaujolais. So it's a question of division of responsibility.
And you were saying Raúl Perez, who you make wine with in Spain, was one of your old friends as well, and that's how it started as well.
Yes. Raúl is a very old friend. I've been in Spain very often, and we have done some testing together, probably 15 years ago in Madrid or things like that. And so when I decided, the area of Bierzo where they grow Mancia is something which is a style of wine which I do like. So it was very, when Raúl offered me to do something together, I immediately accepted. And obviously now Antoine is taking over because he has more time to do that, and he's very interested in doing that.
But that was a good move, and the wines are very good. So that's well done. And so, Ted, were you ever tempted to make wine like Alain somewhere else, like outside Sonoma, or maybe in the future? Or
yeah, my kids are a little bit behind Alain, so the need hasn't been as urgent yet. Hopefully that will come, but I decided in the early 2000s, Arnaud, I had the opportunity to go work in New Zealand. And I looked at this opportunity to work there, and I had to think about it long and hard, because I realized that having a young family, if I was going to go to New Zealand, which is exactly the opposite direction, of course, of Europe, that I probably wouldn't go to Europe for a while. In other words, if I wanted to stay married and have a happy marriage and have a happy family and manage Littorai, I had to decide if I was going to go left or go right for a while. And I decided that given the challenges of working in a place I did not know at all, meaning New Zealand, the opportunity to work with this family that owns Burn Cottage Vineyards, their dedication, I said, yeah, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there for a while. And so I traveled there 2 to 3 times a year, including for the month of harvest, for what ended up being, 16 years in New Zealand. And it was just an amazing experience. I was not as adventurous as Alain. It was Pinot Noir. I was not going outside of my little comfort zone. But it was absolutely amazing. And then I decided, okay, in 2018, I'm going to retire from this and leave it in their capable hands, because, as Alain said, that's so important, right? You whether it's a family or a team, you grow a team. Hopefully, they learn their job and then off they go. They should do it. You shouldn't hang around. And I felt really strongly that I'd done what I could for them. I'll always love New Zealand. It was an amazing experience, and I learned a huge amount. But yeah, that's been good enough for me for now. I do think that we do, at least in our world, we do have to think about alternative varieties. So we grow a little bit of Chenin Blanc on the coast now, as you know, and we're going to experiment with some other white varieties and red varieties, because I think it's all of us have to be recognizing that hopefully our varieties will survive and can adapt to climate change, but we better be ready for other eventualities also.
And we had some questions earlier about that climate change, how you deal with it, and specifically on the supply chain. Like, is there anything you do, in terms of carbon footprint, like the weight of the ball, or the way you transport balls? Do you give any thoughts about that, or is it just part of your global philosophy anyway, on anything you do already?
Alain, you want to tackle that one first?
Yes, I don't have many things to mention about that. We obviously, our winery, we started from scratch, so we have done everything since the very beginning. So loading the cases in the truck was something that we do by hand for years. So it was a good incentive not to use heavy bottles. No, that's a joke, but frankly, I did not see many interest in having these very, very fancy bottles, which to me are, well, it's good for somebody else, but not for me. I think we are very classical in the term of cases and bottles, and we try to avoid but shipments. You know, we have to we have to work with the shipments in France, which are definitely probably different from the US, because we ship from the winery every day, even small amounts of wine, and I believe that this should be improved, but it's difficult to improve that because the cost of manpower makes that the transportation company, they want us to have everything prepared, so we make very, very small shipments, very small pallets, to prevent them to do a sorting in their premises. So that's obviously costs more money, but that's the way. That's a long argument with the French regulations, and I don't cover that anymore.
Yeah. I think it maybe on our end it's a little more. Arnaud, you've experienced the States for many years. It's a very schizophrenic place. On one hand, you have a whole group of people who want to deny that humans have any effect on climate change. And then you have a whole group of people who believe passionately that we need to be more active and do things about it. So it's a very split world, but we hear these comments and we absolutely hear from people who would like to know what we're doing. And so the bottle weight thing has always been something that I inherited probably from Jacques Sess, actually. Jacques was never big on fancy bottles. And I know that I've known forever that Alain is not. So keeping bottle weight down has always been important to us. We didn't end up going for screw caps, and there was lots of technical reasons that suggested for a period of time that, you know, that screw caps might be better. But there always lurked in my mind the sense that cork is a natural product, and that the cork forests are, you know, I mean, the savannas, they're not true forests, but the cork savannas of Portugal are really, you know, a valuable and sustainable ecosystem. So we never gave up cork. The capsule drives me crazy, Arnaud. It's kind of a waste of time. So we're trying to figure out what to do about capsules, because I don't really see any need for a capsule. So those things are always on our mind, absolutely. And then the one thing I would say when I get this question, and it makes me laugh, is, you know, when people say, well, what are you doing in the vineyard about climate change? It's like, well, we farm biodynamically. I mean,
you fight against it every day.
I don't know what more I can do. It's like the whole system is designed for, you know, it's just for, you know, for being, you know, resistant in the face of change. So it's like, you know, it may not be a hip term for being aware of climate change, but it certainly plays a role.
But that's already a lot of work. And Ted, just before we go back to your time after Dujac, and someone asked you left Burn Cottage, right? You're no longer involved.
That's right. I retired. I retired because, as I said, I thought I'd done what I could for them.
Everything, instead of work, I mean, going back and forth.
It was also fascinating, Arnaud, to set up a truly biodynamic vineyard in a place that had never seen one. So Nick Mills from Ripon will give me grief about this, because he did spray a few preparations before we got there. But Burn Cottage really was the first vineyard from the ground up that was farmed biodynamically. And so there was a lot of skepticism in New Zealand that it could work, because, as you know, Central Otago is an extreme climate. It really is. I mean, it's not far from the South Pole, so systems can blow in quite quickly. But it ended up being, you know, it opened some eyes, I hope. I think we really had an effect.
That's cool. You know, so we're talking about how you both of you met. what happened when Alain started making wine in Creuse? And was it the time you left Dujac, Ted? And how did you also stay in touch? I guess you know,
So we, there was a great group of friends there that were all friends of Jacques, of which Alain was one of many. And I stayed in touch with them because part of the reason is that we had been in a bicycling club together. So it was this wonderful club that existed far after I left it, but in which we would bike around between 3-star restaurants. And these guys were just animals. I mean, Alain and Jacques and all these friends, just animals. And, here I was, this kid who was supposed to be younger and more able, and they would ride me into the ground. Although they figured out pretty quick that maybe you didn't want to do the 3-star lunch and the 3-star dinner. Maybe the one was enough. But I don't know if it was Graillot or not, but I remember one day when we had a really long day. I think the weather must have been lousy, and we all kind of hit the wall, and I was just suffering miserably. And somebody, Alain or maybe Jacques or somebody said to me, well, listen, just go get in a really hot tub and drink a Coca-Cola. I looked at this person and said, comment? A Coca? Pourquoi? And of course, it's all about the caffeine and the sugar and whatnot. So I went and happily soaked in the tub and drank my Coca-Cola and promptly went downstairs for a 3-star dinner. That was a lot better.
Yeah, way better. So what was your last job before, just before going back, moving back to the US then? Like, what was your last?
So after I left Domaine Dujac, right, there really was not any future for an American in Burgundy. As you know, this is a really different time. And so I thought I should just head back to the States. I wanted to do a couple of different things. Wasn't sure I wanted to stay in the wine business. So I got out for a little bit, and then Jacques is the one who called me about working at Domaine Graillot after Guy Graillot had passed away. And that's what brought me back for a couple of years to work at Graillot. And of course that renewed in close association all the friendship with Alain and everybody else. Patrick Bies, who was a really dear friend of both of us, who went and deserted us too soon in life. But we'll get our revenge on a bicycle in heaven when we get there. So I'm planning on being ready for it. But that was a very different experience, of course, because then I was the patron. And as Alain mentioned earlier in this conversation, this was not always an easy thing if you were an outsider. Alain was from the Rhone, but he wasn't a winemaker when he went back. And it's not easy. It's not easy because people look at you with some suspicion. There's some jealousy, all those sorts of things. But it was an invaluable experience for me. And I couldn't have done it without the support of Jacques and Patrick and Alain, et cetera, just every day encouraging me. Because it was a time when, the way you proved yourself wasn't necessarily about wine. That's great. You make good wine. That's fine. The way you proved yourself was how fast can you prune that row of vines? That's how you prove yourself. And if you listen, kid, if you can't prune that row of vines as fast as I can, then you're not my boss. So there was a lot of that stuff to deal with. And having the support of Alain, et cetera, that was really meaningful. Yeah.
And so nowadays, do you get inspired from what you guys do? Like, I guess it's different grape, different climate, and everything. But at the end, the goal is the very same. So, is there anything you exchange, constantly? Like, even like we're talking about climate change, how to fight it. Like, I'm sure between two vignerons, like like you both are, like there's many things to discuss, no?
Insults. Like, we exchange insults all the time.
Of course, that's part of the job.
I think for me, one thing I think about, because I was Alain's agent for most of the States for a period of time, so I have lots of vintages of Graillot in my cellar, and the inspiration, part of the inspiration for me has been just tasting older bottles of Graillot, and I'm not sure I'm going to get this one right, Alain, but my memory is that the 91s were particularly Graillot in their youth, very firm, high acid, almost difficult wines when they were young. And they took a long time to come around, but boy, when they came around, it was like, wow. And it was just such a great reminder for me that if you're really passionate about wine, that's the kind of thing that interests you, right? It's not about today. It's not about what a particular visitor or writer or magazine thinks about our wine today. It's really about that experience years later with a bottle that shows you the value of patience and time in our modern rushed world.
But that's funny you mentioned that, Ted. So because do you, like we say, like all, I mean, like early vintages of Alain's wine were maybe tough. Yeah, it's probably the right word to say, to drink when young, and they really, you know, benefited from aging. Alain, with all the youngsters coming in, you know, the young growers, do you see more approachable style in what they do, and maybe, you know, they distem to make it more approachable when young, or do you think the very classic of like old Clap or even yourself when you were young, that style doesn't exist anymore in Northern Rhone, in your opinion?
Well, I think this still exists. Which I was thinking that in fact, when my first wines have been regarded very, very differently in France and in let's say overseas. In France, it was regarded as quite attractive when young because a lot of fruit, and many comments were at that time raised up, stating, well, it's good, it's fruity, but this won't last, this won't age. And so I maybe I thought at that time that maybe it was true. And now I just realized that in fact, they could age quite well, and certainly we will enjoy some 90s vintage. Of course, some vintages are off, but 93, for instance, was a little bit complicated. But in spite of that, it's not not passed away at the moment. It's still attractive, but I believe that maybe the change of climate makes that some wines which have been made with whole cluster, a little bit like I'm doing, could be now appreciated more easily now than 20 years ago, because definitely the ripeness is definitely, thanks to the change of climate, the ripeness is always something which is achieved. It's completed. In the 80s, we had some vintage with a very, very low ripeness in the grapes, and obviously wines young were a little bit harsh and maybe with some veggie aromas, which could evolve properly, but at the beginning it could be not as attractive as now the vintage. Even whole cluster could be assessed by far more easily.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, for sure. And so we're approaching like a hour, and Alain has a train to catch to go to Paris. So we cannot stay all night long with all of you. So if anyone has a question before maybe we end the webinar, please feel free to ask. But otherwise, yeah, thank you very much for the time. We still have like a few more minutes, but I don't want to miss this train, especially if you're coming to Paris to see us. So.
Yes, I don't want to lose my time. Yes.
Okay, so I have one question regarding the different kind of grapes you can use in Bordeaux. This has been changed, and you can use now far more grapes, and even some were like Touriga Nacional in Bordeaux. Were you surprised of that, or are you expecting to see that for more appellations? Basically, allowing more different grapes because of climate change, probably, in those appellations?
I'm not sure I have expertise enough to answer this question, frankly. Especially in my case, where in the Rhone, we are concentrated on only one grape. When you start to make blends of Cabernet, Merlot, and the other Cabernet, Sauvignon, and Franc, you are already prepared to add a new eventually possibly a new variety. When you are concentrated on only 100% the same grape Syrah, it's not something that you are not really needed to consider that another variety could bring something. That's why I have no ideas about that, frankly.
Well, but Alain, you do in the sense that you know the Southern Rhone well. So you certainly, although it's not maybe applicable for you in Crows right now, right? You certainly are very, very familiar with Southern Rhone blends. So it's not something that's completely foreign to you.
No, but I've done some consulting in the south of France, in Luberon, and where they blend Syrah and Grenache and Carignan. But we stay on some Cinsault, but we stay on a very, very limited number of varieties. So I have no further information about new varieties.
But do you see someone planting new, I mean, like other red grapes than Syrah in the region, or no?
No, I did not see that. But one point which should be mentioned is that I'm not talking about Rhone, but in Beaujolais, some growers have already planted some Syrah, which makes sense because in fact the change of climate, Syrah could go a little bit farther to the north. That's the first point. And the second point is that most of the soils in Beaujolais are granite, as it is in Saint-Joseph. So it makes sense. I did not test. I don't know, but this is something which to me doesn't look really stupid. But it has to be tested.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. A few more questions before we let you go, Alain. What is the process for the Girod? I'm not sure how you pronounce that.
Girod.
Yeah, Girod. How do you make it basically? And I know it's not on every vintages. Like, is it just barrel selection?
That's very easy to explain. I say that in French. The Girod is la cuvée du patron. It means that, in fact, after 1 year of aging, we test all the barrels and we decide if the vintage allows that in terms of quality of quantity, that we could do a special cuvée, which is called la Girod. So it's not a vineyard selection; it's a barrel selection, and the criteria to select a barrel is more made on harmony and balance than power.
And your thoughts about the 96 should be good to open now. 1996.
1996, yes, yeah. Because it was 1996 as probably one of the most acid vintage of the last 20 years or 30 years, and now. Thanks to this high acidity, the wine evolved very, very nicely. I think it's good to drink it now.
Cool.
It's time.
One question for you, Ted. When you were at Rouleau, as you can imagine, like an American, so foreigner in a true, artisanal like area like Burgundy, was there a pressure for you to not change the style, or were you tempted just to put your own style and winemaking style basically, or you just kept the same way of doing?
There was no interest in changing the style, and I mean that both from the Rouleaus and from me, in the sense that what Guy had done and the wines he made were really beloved and and appreciated. And, you know, my whole apprenticeship in Burgundy was about respecting place and people. I mean, this is the great genius of Burgundy, and the great, in some ways, the greatest inheritance is that sort of sense of respect for a place and how things are done and tradition. And so, no, I was there to just do the best I could and keep everything right in line, you bet. And I was thrilled to do it, thrilled to do it.
Sure. And so maybe I will just pick the last two questions. The last one might be a little bit longer, but I would just ask from you guys, maybe just 1 or 2 words. But you have multiple, you know, Pinot clones, Ted, and I know in the US it's a big thing, like talking about clones. I guess it's a bit less here in France. But Alain, do you work also with multiple clones for Syrah, or do you have Sélection Massal? How do you?
Yes. Well, we have only Sélection Massal. I've been lucky enough that the place where we are, our vines have been planted in 73 and 77. So it means that it was before the arrival of clonal selection. So obviously, as we have a very traditional wood, I think we have all the new planting, and we have done a Sélection Massal with our wood, with our vines. And I do rely in that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alain. And to finish, not maybe the easiest question, but maybe a few words from each of you. Tricky question. So what would be your advice for a young and coming winemaker who wants to start a small, you know, winery in the future? What would be your best advice to that person? Good luck.
Would you start, Ted, or do I even? Yes, obviously, good luck. And my recommendation would be do what you want to do. Don't listen to the others. Don't listen to the merchant. Don't listen to the enologist. Sorry, and do what you want to do and be yourself.
I think it's really easy, Arnaud, to look at someone like Alain or maybe me who's been successful and to think that, oh, I couldn't do that. And that's the real value of Alain's description of what it was like to start out in Crows when he didn't own the property and the property was quite a mess, et cetera, et cetera. It's don't be afraid. I mean, everybody has to start somewhere. Do what you want, stay small, do it with passion, and, you know, and things will work.
That's exactly, that's
passion
perfect.
and hard work. Yeah. And you do your mistakes, but you learn from it, right?
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Alain, for your time. Ted, also for your time. Thank you for everyone for attending. The recording will be available as well, so please feel free to contact Rachel, and she will be able to, to send you the recording. But I hope to see you all here in Paris. You're more than welcome anytime, each of you. And
Arnaud, we want to thank you too, and Cave Le Grand for giving us the time to do this with you. And
no, it's all the pleasure is for me, really.
No, we would love, if you have never been to Cave Le Grand in Paris, you need to go. It's quite a special place. So we'd love to see you all go say hi to Arnaud and give him a hard time, because he's a real gentleman for having done this.
No problem. It would be a pleasure.
Okay, Arnaud, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure talking with you. I hope you understand all my poor English, but
it was perfect.
I've tried my best. And Ted, it has been a great pleasure to exchange with you. I look forward to seeing you in Rhone now. So you may come when you want. You know, we prepare to do a good tour day. Okay.
We'll do it. All right. Thank you, guys. We'll see you.
Thank you, everybody.
Au revoir. Merci beaucoup. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.